Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pixelists Podcast, the podcast about all the nerdy things we love and enjoy. As always, we're your hosts. I'm Will, that's Blake, and it's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. Every
Yeah.
time we have like the off week, it feels like I'm like, how are you, man? What have you been doing with your life?
Yeah.
You know?
And it just feels exacerbated because it was the off week. I went to a different country for a time, and it just so happened that Worlds Beyond Number finished its first arc, because normally we would have at least done
right
a Worlds Beyond in this interim, but we didn't even have that. So it just feels like a super long time without you, my friend, without our sit down.
How was your trip?
It was good. It was good. I'm not going to bore everybody with it here, but as you know, I went to Iceland. I'll say that much. But as you know, I went to Iceland last year, and I only went back because for a wedding. The same people we went with last year got engaged there, and so they wanted to get married there. Long story short, the first trip was amazing. Did a lot of sightseeing, did a lot of cool stuff. Not that this one wasn't great, but this one, it was much more wedding focused. So it's not like I was going out and doing a bunch of exploring and stuff, but it was good. It was fun.
Yeah. And then are you sipping on some coffee by chance?
Yeah, I was about to, embrace my shame and bring up
Listen, I don't have a problem with it. Okay, I just want everyone to know I don't have an issue with it. It's just that you've mentioned
I've got a rule.
Yeah, that's all I was going to point out.
I've got my rule about not drinking coffee past 3, and it's 3:30.
It's currently 3:30, guys.
I'm not, but here's the thing: I'm a man of habit and of ritual. That too. But so I like, part of my ritual for the Pixels podcast is to have a nice cup of coffee, except for when we do like night episodes. I'm not that psychotic.
We need to start recording in the morning, but I feel like there's so much happening in the day that we're always like, for me, it always works out better to be like in the afternoon to record. But I'm thinking like, if you got your brew going, I want to have my brew going, you know?
Yeah.
Little morning brews with the dudes.
Yeah. I like it. We'll workshop that, but I like it.
Yeah. Well, if you are checking out our podcast for the first time, we'd like to talk a lot of D&D and all things related to it. And today we're talking a little Critical Role, episode 71, I believe.
That's right.
This one had an interesting title to it, like Miss and something.
Whimsy. Yeah.
Right. I
feel like it fit though.
Yeah.
Very actually. Very Studio Ghibli feel to this episode.
Yeah. Well, typically we have announcements before we dive into talking about the episode, but do we?
Oh, we do actually. Okay. As you guys I think we mentioned this in our last episode, but if you didn't catch that, or if you're new here, we are going to be hosting a Calamity rewatch. So whether you've seen it before, or if you're one of the lucky few who hasn't and might get to experience it for the first time, Blake and I loved it so much, and it's been over a year, right?
It's been
a while.
A year and I think 3 months, a year and 2 months.
Yeah, so it's something Blake and I have talked about a lot, like being like, we should rewatch that, and a lot of people in our community have expressed similar feelings. So we decided, let's actually do it. So we're going to be hosting that rewatch, and scheduling this is still, we're feeling it out. The best way for you to participate is to join our Discord. That is where the watch party will happen, and that is where information, as we flesh this out, will be provided. But for now, we have tentatively marked out a date to watch episode 1, and that is going to be on Sunday do you remember? 24th, I think.
24th. Okay.
Which is about a week and a half from today. So Sunday the 24th.
And I think we said 7:30 Central Time.
Yes.
So you guys will just have to you'll have to time converter for yourself, but 7:30 Central Time, and like Critical Role, an episode is about, I guess I can't remember the run times of each one, but I think they're like around 4.5, 5 hours.
Yeah.
So we'll try to watch it all in one night, and then I think the plan is every consecutive Sunday after that. There's 4 episodes total. but so for the 3 after that to watch through all 4 of them together.
Yeah,
So
really looking forward to that. Again, more info will be posted in the Discord. But just very briefly, there will be like a spoiler policy because I do know we have at least a couple people who have never seen it. So,
mhm.
but yeah, we'd love to watch through that with y'all. So again, Sunday the 24th, 7:30 Central. For those of you that are in different time zones, Critical Role normally airs at 9 p.m. So this would be an hour and a half earlier than Critical
Mhm.
Role starts for you, whenever that happens to be.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, join the Discord. Keep an eye. There's a whole channel called Calamity Rewatch. Keep an eye on that for more details. But yeah, the plan is to do one a week on every Sunday, but tentative on those further episodes just in case, we don't know what's going to happen in a couple weeks. But
Right.
that's the plan. Would love to have you join us. And if you're new to the community or you're not, but you haven't joined the Discord, join the Discord. We'll be doing stuff like that, obviously, but also it's just a great place to hang out for our normal Critical Role watch parties and just our normal discussion. So would love to have you join us, and everyone is welcome, of course.
Yep.
Um, Other than that, I briefly just touched on this, but The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One did have its finale of Arc 1 episode. Blake and I haven't had a chance to talk about it yet, but that's probably coming this week, and it was phenomenal. I know
Mhm.
we've said this a lot, but for any of you Critical Role fans that haven't checked that out yet, would highly recommend. Speaking of Calamity, it's Brennan that is DMing over there, and Lou Wilson and Abria, who were also both in Calamity, are in it, and of course Erika Ishii as well. So can't recommend it enough. Definitely check that out and be on the lookout for our episode talking about the finale.
Good stuff.
I think that's all I got.
Okay, well, diving into episode 71, Mist and Whimsy, we like to do a little recap of what happened in the episode, just because the episodes are about 4 or 5 hours long. So, what we like to do, we like to give a recap and then we cut that out and put it as just a separate video on the YouTube channel. So, if you're watching just the recap, you can click the link in the description to check out our full thoughts and discussions on the episode. And of course, Critical Role, there's a lot of awesome stuff that happens in a given episode. So if you have thoughts of your own or theories or things you want to chat about, definitely go to that video and drop a comment and let us know what you think. But having said that, like I mentioned, episode 71 of Campaign 3, Mist and Whimsy. This episode opens up on the island of Slaval. I don't know if they quite know it's an island or not. Whenever they arrive, they find themselves in this dense, humid forest. There is fog everywhere. In fact, it's very much like waking up in the middle of a jungle is kind of the feel of it. Like they hear rustling of animals. In fact, in a little bit, they're going to actually see a shadow of some massive creature. So they're very wary about making too much noise. However, they do want to try to figure out exactly where they are. Now, Orem does do a perception check, I think like a 30 or a 34 or something
Typical.
insane like Orem, yeah, typically does. Chetney is going to try to smell the air, and they do know that there must be the ocean nearby. So they decide to head that direction to where they eventually find themselves on a cliffside. With the ocean crashing up against a black pebble beach. I believe Imogen is going to cast Fly on herself, and I think she also casts it on Orem, who flies up and just tries to get a better picture of the island. And in fact, the island as a whole is literally covered by this heavy, thick fog. And in the fog, that is where they, in fact, see this massive, shadowy creature, about 100 feet long, that is moving through the fog. So coming back down, Orm explains what they've seen, and they're not really sure where to go, what to do. They just know they're looking for Jirana, the shore shrew, who Elith had been given, had received some counseling from, or was mentioned in an earlier episode. Separate to this, Fern's going to cast Pass Without a Trace and decide, you know what, why don't we just get a good night's sleep so that we can start fresh in the morning and figure out, where do we go from here. Now, as they're moving through the forest and they're trying to find a good campsite, they're also noticing these little tiny pixie like. I think Matt describes them as basically like lizards with wings, like little tiny, like
Yeah.
inch tall creatures, not wearing any clothes, like some kind of like native creature of some kind. And these things are flying by, moving around, kind of staying a little bit wary to the party, and yeah, so they do also come across a destroyed campsite, and Chetney is going to cast. I don't know if you can hear like the knocking on my door. By the way, it's my toddler trying to get my attention, but I'm just pressing through, you know. So anyway, the Travis via Chetney is going to do his grim psychometry ability, where he can find out the history of a certain location, and does it on this abandoned campsite and sees visions of basically men running for their lives as some kind of creature attacks the camp. They continue on from this place until they eventually find what feels like a good camping place. They still don't want to attract too much attention, so Fern actually casts plant growth to cause like these plants to grow up over them, kind of like this makeshift safe camping place. In addition to this, there's more of these pixies that show up. FCG is going to cast Speak with Animals and doesn't seem able to really chat with them. But then eventually, I think speaks, it's not comprehend languages, tongues.
Yeah.
FCG eventually casts tongues and begins to speak to these tiny little creatures, one of which decides to bless FCG by pooping into his hand. So FCG, they get like this little poop in their hands, and I think it had actually like a lavender smell to it, or it
Yeah.
wasn't like totally wild. But they begin to basically figure out like, okay, what's going on here? Who are you guys? And also during this whole thing, there's also been like this loud noise that's been happening every 10 or 15 minutes in the distance. And these little creatures explain that this is one of many, I can't remember what they called it, but I think about at Yellowstone, like the natural geysers. Matt sort of describes something like that continuously, they're all over the island. Do you remember what he called them, by the way?
I don't remember like the specific name, but yeah, like geysers kind of.
Yeah, basically geysers. That's like what they're hearing. And then they also ask about the shadowy creature, which the tiny pixies explain. Oh, that's the smelly one. They also ask, FCG asks about, hey, do you know where Torres is or Girana? And the creatures basically say, yeah, you're going to want to do a big fire, like make a big fire that'll attract Torres. And they're like, okay, big fire sounds like a good decision. So they go to sleep. They wake up in the morning, and they're like, okay, Operation Build a Big Fire. So they get led up to this big volcanic hill. They actually start to wonder, like, are these pixies, like, can they be trusted? Or are they potentially, like, leading us to the shadowy creature to feed to it? Imogen actually does do an insight check and gets a whisper from Matt. But all is to say, they gather some dry wood. Fern's going to produce flame. Laudna is going to cast fireball on it, and they create this massive pyre. And it's as this is happening in the edges of the fog around them, Chetney begins to hear something moving, and Matt basically describes this, I think, like chameleon or like almost like Komodo, like
Yeah.
lizard-like creature that I think was made of like volcanic rock that comes out of the fog, massive creature. And Chetney tries to stay still and actually rolls a 21 for a stealth check. And yet Matt describes the smelly one sniffing, and I think he reveals it even rolled a natural 20 when they came back from the break, but snaps at Chetney. We roll initiative, and that is where we go to break. So you want to take it from there?
Yes, sir. Okay, so come back from break, we pick up, and like Blake said, the smelly one actually hit a nat 20 for this attack on Chetney. and ends up dealing 62 damage to him in one
Kind of a
go.
lot. Kind of a
Yeah,
lot.
little bit. So we roll initiative, and as always, just kind of try to hit the highlights here to speed through things. But Chetney having taken a massive swipe of damage, the first thing that happens is Orem runs in and bait and switches with Chet to provide him some cover.
Right.
Um, Imogen summons a Raylorin and has it attack. Everyone is just launching attacks at this thing. And F.C.G actually compels it to run away and is successful. So while the rest of the party is littering their attacks, the next round begins, and everyone hears this like thunderous noise and this loud croaking, which the smelly one seems to react to in fear, and all the little pixies are excited. But combat continues. So before the smelly one runs due to its compulsion from F.C.G, it does attack first, and hits Orem, who is now the one right in front of it, and does a ton of damage to Orem. And then it begins to run away due to the compulsion. F.C.G heals Orem, who is on like death's door, by the way, from how much damage he's taken across the 2 rounds already. And then Ashton grabs Orem and kind of drags him to safety. The next round continues, and the croaking gets louder. The smelly one getting even more afraid. And it's also starting to look rough as well from like 3 rounds of just everybody in Bell's Hells attacking it. And it's at this point that a massive 25-foot toad like rains down in from the sky, having leapt there, and slams into the ground. Everyone's like, what the heck? And Imogen actually gets a glimpse into its mouth and can see like a furnished living room, complete with a fireplace in there.
Nice.
So she reaches out telepathically and says, Torres, like, are you Torres? We were sent by the Tempest. And it doesn't respond with language, but Matt says that it acknowledges her and basically tells her to like, hey, just like kind of get out of the way. So Imogen lets everybody know, like, hey, this thing's on our side. And as we continue through initiative, the smelly one's next turn is just bolting as far as it can away from here. But Torres leaps again into the air and lands right behind it, and then basically like flips it off this like cliff that they're on, beyond the horizon into the ocean. Makes quick work of this thing. So combat is essentially over now. Torres makes his way back to the party and opens his mouth, basically letting them all into this house that is inside of him. And inside there are like log partitions and different chambers with artwork and plants. And in a rocking chair, there sits an old female turtle humanoid. She introduces herself as Jorana, and if they know Kiki, then they are trusted friends. We now basically have a lot of conversations for the rest of the episode. But she tells them that Torres is her companion, her home, and her guardian, and that the smelly one that they just fought is actually called a Barry Mondolo, and it is a child of the Esquala. I couldn't read my own handwriting, but I think that's what it said. Which is essentially the serpent that travels around and protects the reef surrounding the islands and lays eggs, and the eggs hatch into the Barry Mondolos. Orem at this point then asks, "Oh yeah, we also saw like some massive sky creatures in the clouds. Like, what's up with that?" And Jorana says those are cloud jaws, and they're basically like sky whales. They're not evil per se, but they are dangerous, and they eat what they can find in the sky, which is a big reason why airships don't travel to this part of the world. The party then learns that Torres has been alive for centuries, and Jorana basically just inherited him. She doesn't know who the previous tenant of Torres was, but she's here now, and they are kind of the guardians of this place, or at least Torres is. They then ask, or excuse me, Jorana asks, like, why have you come? And talks about how, she helped Keyleth, and Keyleth has an incredible heart. And, she was able to help her alleviate some of the burden on her heart. And they're like, yeah, Keyleth told us about that. Like, how did you become a grief counselor? And Jorana says that, she's seen many things in her long life, both wonderful and terrible, and wonderful from terrible. So she has perspective on a lot of things and a connection with the natural life force of Exandria, and she just wants to help people who have had similar experiences. She tells them that she's been on the Shattered Teeth her entire life, which is some 120 odd years. But then we quickly find out that it's like 120 years in spirit time, which is closer to maybe 400 years in their time. But the group kind of gets this feeling that like maybe she's kind of like a little bit lost in the sauce here. So we don't truly know how old she is, but it seems like she's pretty old. And she also reveals that she only stays on this one singular island of the Shattered Teeth, but there are 43 in total. So Ashton then tells her kind of why they're here and quickly about his history and the Hishari and how he's just looking for answers and was told about the Tree of Atrophy and that he could maybe find some clarification here with the tree. And Tirana says that Evantravir, which is the tree, took all the sorrow and all the loss that was destroyed in the calamity upon themselves and became a memory of those and for those that were on this island, and they took root to be a vessel for that sorrow, for the sorrow of others. And Evantravir is one of the few views into death from the material plane. I'm sure we'll be discussing this, but it is still a living entity. It was once a Gaujashari that protected Exandrias through the Age of Arcanum. The tree is a lot of things. It is between spaces and can be dangerous to some, but give purpose to others. And it can also apparently reveal the path toward one's own death. Joanna says that that is on a different island though, and to get there, there's many boats that you could possibly use to travel. They talk about potentially teleporting with Imogen, but she warns them, if you do try to flag down a boat, know that there are different factions here in the Shattered Teeth, and they don't all get along. Um, Also, to make it even more difficult, all of these islands are not stationary; they are ever shifting. The nature of the destruction of Dominus left a perpetual churning element of energy throughout the area. So you either have to pray to your gods to find your way or keep up with a good cartographer, of which there are none on the island. But there are lots of shipwrecks, and those can be looted, and maps can sometimes be found. It's at this point that Joanna hands Chetney a map that she most recently found, but it was 12 years ago. And on this map, I think there are 3 islands and a bunch of charts. But hearing of these shipwrecks, they realize perhaps they could go find one and repair one, especially with Chetney's expertise with wood. And maybe that could be how they get around. But he says, I'll have to check it out to see if it's possible for me to repair something like that. So they're sitting there trying to determine, okay, how are we going to get to the island of Kalutha, which is where Montravir is? And they ask about the factions she alluded to earlier. And she tells them of the Ascended Host and an area called the Revaspire, I believe. I might be saying that wrong, which is like a settlement that they guard. She says that they respect and expect honesty. And she also tells them of the Wandermen, who are a potential way that they could flag down a ship. They could flag down a Wanderman ship. But they will expect payment and don't show too much money or else you'll wake up beneath the reefs, she says. She then gives them a compass that once belonged to the dread captain Erlu Novos. And it's enchanted to be attuned to the islands because Novos was once a wild mount pirate, and his reign of terror was actually ended by the Ascended Host in an ambush over 100 years ago. But he made a dark deal, and his ship still haunts the waters. So Joanna says that if you place this compass in the water, that should summon his like ghostly ship named the Crimson Abyss, and it'll come try to like claim the compass back. But she says that perhaps you could bargain with Captain Novos into a mutually beneficial agreement that would maybe allow him to recover his lost treasure. So basically, an exciting but dangerous option if necessary. Um, it's at this point that Chetney casts Hunter's Bane on the compass to learn more about it, and Matt describes him getting this vision of a pirate ship amidst a fierce battle, and there's like a bearded dwarf captain that is like shouting to the gods and like cursing at the sky. And Matt says you can't make out like what he's actually saying, but you notice a bolt of lightning comes and strikes him in the head, and he falls to the deck, presumably dead, with blood pooling behind him, but his face curled into a smile. So the party is pretty excited about this whole ghost ship thing. But before they, make their next steps, Ashton does ask about the Titans that died in this part of the world. And Drana tells him about Roshan, the Emperor of Fire, and Kamort, the Empress of Earth. And she says that, it's dangerous around here, mostly because of this energy and the stuff that happened. So it's going to be really dangerous. So let me send you guys with a little bit of a care package. And so she scurries off, but quickly returns with a thick, brackish vial, a yellowish bottle, and an empty looking vial that gives off light. She also gives them 2 reef moss balms, which are basically greater healing potions, and a slick shimmer oil, which makes you slippery and basically harder to hit. And finally, a vial of cleansing flame, which can cure a number of maladies but will burn you in the process. So after that, F.C.G. returns the kindness by giving Joanna some cookies that they've been baking, and basically says, that he admires her for her therapy and that he dabbles in being a therapist as well, but he's not very good at it. And he's actually not even sure if he's a person. It's at this point that Joanna takes F.C.G.'s face and says, I can see within you that you carry very deep grief, but do not think you are incapable of helping others. And others can help you as well. So perhaps Ashton is not the only one seeking Yvonne Trevere. And Joanna actually invites F.C.G. to come back to her sometime, and perhaps they can have a little talk, a session. Finally, Chetney asks, hey, what's the key to such a long life that you've led? And she hands him a vial and tells him it's for stamina. She then tells everybody to hold on as Torres is going to leap and bound them toward the North Shore, where they can check out some of these shipwrecks. So they do just that, and they arrive, and Bell's Hells begins to exit Torres, but Ashton actually hangs back a little bit and says, how do you know to grieve if you don't know what was taken from you? And Joanna says that, you just don't focus on the loss, focus on what you've gained. It can only weigh you down as much as you're willing to let it. So Ashton then follows and exits, and the crew makes their way toward the shoreline, and that's where the episode ends. Again, episode 71 of Campaign 3, Mist and Whimsy. Again, if you want to check out our full discussion, which we will be launching into now, check out the link in the description. Boom.
All right. Great job, man.
I felt it felt like it wasn't that much, but then as I was getting into it, I was like, oh, this feels like a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Not a lot happened, but a lot happened.
Yeah.
A lot of not a lot of big picture stuff, I guess. I guess they haven't moved too much farther along their quest, but there were a lot of cool details and just interesting insights in the episode for sure.
Yeah. Ghost pirates.
Yes, which the party, it seems like they're already set.
That's we're doing that one.
Taking the compass to the water. Which, by the way, this was such a fun, typical DM technique's not the right word, but when the party gets to somewhere new and you try to give them options on what they could do, and you're like, oh, and here's this cursed compass that will summon the ghost pirate, and they're like, yep, that's the one.
You can stop talking, we have decided.
In my campaign, I was giving them, my group, some options like that, and they literally, I mentioned there was a cursed silver mine under the city, and they're like, okay, yeah, we want to go there, let's go do that. And I was like, right now? And they're like, yeah, let's go. And I was like, yes, okay. Let me. I thought we
frantically
were plan for it, or yeah,
building a dungeon.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's hilarious. I'd be the same way though. That compass sounded really cool, like a Dread Pirate Novos.
Yeah.
Very very Revenant-esque, which I'm guessing it literally is one.
Yeah.
But really interested I mean, I guess we're diving into this, but I guess why not? I'm really interested to see if they do try to like broker a deal, which I think would be really interesting. Cause like, I don't know, like when I think like Revenant Ghost Pirate, you don't really think like, yeah, ally, usually it's like, we got to get away from that thing.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm very curious to see what happens there. And I guess it could just depend on a persuasion roll, really. Um,
Mhm.
so, and you know what it reminded me of? It's been so long that I don't remember the zone or anything, but there was some WoW expansion where like every like 12 hours or something, maybe it was less than that, maybe it was like every 4, um like this pirate ship would spawn and like the captain would like yell out a challenge. Do you remember this at all?
Mm.
The only reason I remember is because you could get a toy from them in the game, and I was like,
Mm.
back then I was like trying to collect all of those.
You're not
um
talking about Cataclysm with like the ship garrison missions, right? Or you mean like an
no,
actual ship?
it was like, I want to say it was like, it was some special location that
Mhm.
like, it was, the location itself was like a quest hub and like a zone hub. And I want to say it was Pandaria just because like that's when I actually played to like a long extent.
Oh, in the not Throne of Thunder, the Isle of Thunder, maybe, or
Yeah, I think it was
yeah,
that, it was there.
where you like couldn't mount, but there was like so many toys and like collectibles and stuff.
Yeah. So it was like every X
Yeah.
amount of hours this guy would spawn. And I think he only had a chance to drop the toy. And I'm getting way off base. We're way off subject here, but it just reminded me of that, like this ghost pirate that would summon when his compass touches the water.
It made me think of Princess Bride because of the
Oh
Dread
yeah,
Pirate Roberts.
yeah,
So yeah, so they're presumably, I mean, I'd say with almost surety, they're gonna go summon this dude.
mhm,
Said dude is going to, I guess, broker a deal to retrieve its treasure, and
yeah,
maybe they go on some hijinks to get the treasure, and then from there they can go to, I keep wanting to call it Kalula,
yeah.
the island. Cthulhu, what is it?
The
Kalutha?
liqueur or whatever.
Yeah, but the name of the island was
Yeah. Well, now I just got
Kalula.
Kahlua in my
Yeah,
mind.
Kalutha, I think. Let's see if I can
Yeah,
find it.
Kalutha. At least that's
Yeah,
what I have written.
yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, what it really boils down to is inter-island travel. Like that's
Mhm,
why they're considering partnering with
mhm.
this dread pirate, which I mean, I I would do the same thing. Like we were just talking about, that was like the really cool option that your players probably are gonna want to latch on to. But like big picture, that's a pretty big like, for just a mode of transportation, that's a pretty big like undertaking, because if they do that, they're making a massive enemy out of the ascended host, right? Because like that's who killed the
Yeah.
dread pirate, and that's who he's going to want to like get his revenge on or get his treasure back from, I presume. So it seems like if
Oh,
they
yeah.
do broker a deal with him, they're like making a lot of enemies. But I mean, who knows how it might play out? Like maybe, maybe they won't be a part of the actual like revenge tour. I don't know. Um,
Mhm,
but interesting to think about. They obviously were talking about potentially teleporting, and
mhm.
then also, I guess maybe Chetney fixing up a ship. But it seems like even if there was like a really good situation for that to be facilitated, it would still take a number of days, I would have to imagine, like to fix a ship. So I don't really see them doing that. Um,
That felt like kind of like whenever they were doing back during the Apogee Solstice launch, when they were talking about like painting the underside of the skyship, and they were like really set on it. And then finally Matt was like, I think they like painted for like an hour or something, and they're like, well, how'd we do? Matt was like, this is gonna take days. Like,
you've done
so I got,
1%.
yeah, I got the same vibes of that. Like, you're gonna build a ship. Okay. So I think the compass for sure. I think what's interesting is I think Von Trivier is on Kalutha,
Hmm.
which I think is where the Ascended Host is, right? Isn't that where Revispire
I
is?
think so. I think so.
So, yeah, I think you make a good point that if the Dread Pirate Uvos,
Uh,
Uva,
Uv.
I think
The last name is Novos. The first name did start
Novos.
with a U, but now I'm
Oh,
not looking
okay.
at it, so I don't remember.
Yeah, I think Uva is grape in Spanish. But yeah, I mean, getting help from this pirate to go to where they want to go, um, which may piss off the main faction on that island. But on the same token, this could be a really interesting thing where it keeps the story, I guess, moving forward. Like if they're going, for me, it's a little bit cleaner if they're going to the island that has uh, Avant Trevere and also meanwhile needing to recover this treasure.
Hmm.
Then, you know, you guys remember episodes 71 through 85 where they went across like 8 islands and then, which I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with, but I also, we've mentioned this like every episode, kind of like the weird energy around like the pacing. Pacing's not the right word, but like, okay,
Is
what's
there
going to
like a
happen?
ticking time
Yeah.
bomb?
Just wondering what is happening elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, which again, if they did some island jumping, wouldn't be a bad thing. But it does feel like, with Matt's mention of so many islands, that I mean, my mind naturally went to like a Shattered Teeth source book, which we wouldn't get anytime soon, I'm sure. But I'm thinking like, what other like campaigns could end up here, or I don't know. So there's a lot that could
Yeah.
happen here.
Agreed. And especially if you throw into the mix, which I want to talk about this like as its own subject a little bit too, but the fact that they're all shifting and moving. So like
Yeah.
even if they hook up with the Dread Pirate and he knows where Kalutha is, it
Hmm.
still might not be as simple as I'm taking you
Yeah.
there. Like it still might be, well, we got to
Mhm.
island hop for 10 islands and
Yeah.
which I'm kind of excited for. I mean, obviously no one wants to be here for 100 episodes or anything, but I'm not going to be mad if there is like
Right.
a little Shattered Teeth arc, if you will. Because I think this place is fascinating. We've never been here before in any of the campaigns. There's this cool like energy here, like both
Mhm.
literally and figuratively. Sky whales are out here chomping up. It's a very like secluded pocket of the world. And as a little dust of deliciousness on top of all of that, is there potentially a time dilation thing going on here? Or do you think that was just Jorana like being old and confused? With the whole like she's 120, but really that's like 400, you know? And that may, even if that was true, that could just be isolated to her and like her weird role that she has, but it could be like a time dilation in this part of the world as well.
It could be. I mean, you think of, I guess it's been almost 1,000 years since the calamity, or longer. How long has it been since the calamity?
I'm not good with the
Yeah.
the grand dates. I think it's at least hundreds. I don't know if
Yeah.
thousands, if it's thousands necessarily.
I was thinking 1,000 because I feel
Yeah.
like I deep dug this a while ago, but I can't remember. Maybe I'm
That
wrong.
that sounds right to me.
But so yeah, I mean, I don't know if time dilation is it. There's very much like a prehistoric vibe
Mm.
to the island.
Mhm.
I did mention in the recap, but they found like a big footprint, like a webbed reptilian footprint that was like big Tyrannosaurus Rex vibe for me.
Wasn't that
Uh,
revealed to be Torres though?
Oh, was it?
Maybe I'm
Oh,
making that up, but for some reason I
before
thought that.
it's the footprint they found before they camped out for the night, like as they were like looking for a place to camp out.
Yeah.
And I think there was the reason I didn't put it together to be Torres was I think they found the footprint and then they like saw like something or heard something in the fog and they're like, okay, well, we're not going that way.
Yeah.
We're gonna go this way instead. But regardless of
Yeah.
whatever it is, I still have like this kind of prehistoric Jurassic
Yeah.
vibe to it. And so I think, for creatures like these to grow so large, it's very like Godzilla-esque, and
Yeah.
maybe there is some kind of like weird, wibbly wobbly time thing happening, or maybe it's just the energy of the primordials is like uranium for for the island. I don't know. It's like radioactive. So
They're all going to be radiation poisoned
I
by the
will
end of
say
this.
I did get strong. I mentioned this in the watch party, but I got strong WoW Maelstrom vibes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
for our listeners, the Maelstrom was it's in the very center of the World of Warcraft or the Warcraft world, and it's where Deathwing, which was the history doesn't matter, but a cataclysmic event basically happened here, and it connects the, for lack of better phrasing, the physical world with another realm, Deep Home. But so it's the spot where there's this basically this massive whirlpool and islands that sort of churn around it. Anyway, so that I got very heavy vibes
Yeah.
as they were describing it about that.
Me too. And I mean, perhaps it was a slight inspiration. I mean, just as easily could not have been, but could be. I mean, we know
Yeah.
Matt has literally works in conjunction with Blizzard many times. I'm sure he's played it.
Conjunction.
We just keep comparing everything to WoW. But no, like I'm with you. And it even could be similar to that. This could be kind of like a weird blending between worlds, given what we've heard
Mm.
about Evantravir being like one of the few windows into death. And also like it's between spaces, she described it as. Um, which I don't know if I'm ready to switch to the tree yet, but I at least wanted to bring that up while you brought up that point. Um, but yeah, I'm totally on board with like the Jurassic World vibes. I think even if that footprint was Torres, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some dinosaurs. I kind of hope we do. I mean, the smelly one kind of was very dinosaur-esque, like a big
Mhm.
chameleon
Yeah.
lizard
Lizard
dinosaur
thing.
creature.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I this is the thing I couldn't read my own handwriting on. So like I hate that I'm like butchering this, but was it Esquala, the thing that like laid
Oh, like a squally
a
or
squally?
something.
You
Let
guys
me
know what I'm
see.
talking about at least.
Yeah.
This big like serpent that guards the reefs. Like that's another massive creature. And then
A
we
squalla.
have
Yeah.
Squall, okay.
Yeah.
Um, then the sky whales, then Torres himself. Like there are these very like primal creatures here. So I can only imagine that we're gonna see more before it's all said and done.
Mm-hmm.
Um which like is that because they've been like seeped in this primordial energy that like is just everywhere here? Or I don't know. But I'm excited for what this could hold with the twisting islands, the crazy creatures, and moving toward the tree now, the potential like really meaty kind of like RP and character exploration we could get, because like every one of Bell's Hells has like some serious like grief issues, I feel like. And that seems to be like the theme of this
Yeah.
tree. Um
What's interesting is we know that oh man, what's his name? Ashton's dad,
F Terran.
F. Terran, visited the tree. So
True.
did he presumably see his own death in doing
Oh,
the ritual?
that would be interesting.
And if so, why do the ritual? And if so, he's not dead. He's still alive. He's out there somewhere.
Or the juice was worth the squeeze. You know, maybe he was like, that's a sacrifice I have to make. You know, if
Wow.
he
This guy's
believed in the
like,
vision so
this guy's
much.
typical charlatan, cult leader. Ego's too big to be a martyr. I got all that from like the 40 seconds that he's been described.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point though. Like super interesting if because this is such a like a weird remote part of the world. Like, and I mean it could be true that it was just a lie. Like F. Terran didn't
True.
actually come here,
Right.
but if he did, really interesting. And I think
Right.
there's, I mean, all we've been told about this guy is that he is like a charlatan, a cult leader.
Mhm.
But at the same time, he was kind of we know very, very little, but like everything that we do know like was true seemingly. Like he did have some artifact of power, and there really was like some titan that they were trying to do a ritual with, to the extent that it created Ashton. You know, it not
Mhm.
created him, but you know what I mean.
Right. Forever changed
So
him.
like it wasn't just all hot air. Like Efterin,
Right.
like there was some truth to like what he was working for or preaching about.
And was the way the story goes, was given some kind of boon from Yvonne Trevere.
Yeah.
So what could that be?
Yeah. I mean,
Knowing the details about it being this window into death, and
yeah.
it's very interesting.
Which, so, I mean, I got to presume Ashton's going to address that. Maybe not, but I would assume if there's like literally like a verbal conversation that's had, I mean, maybe it's like really like metaphorical, maybe it's not like, who knows how it's going to actually work with the tree. But if there is like a back and forth conversation, I have to imagine Ashton's going to ask about, so did you meet my dad? You know?
Right.
So hopefully we'd get some clarity there. But yeah, so we got confirmation that this thing was a Gaudrashari, and that it like took on the sorrow and the devastation of like the cataclysmic event that was the calamity.
Mhm.
And it's between spaces. I know we talked briefly about like, could this be tied to the Tree of Names at all? Which I don't, I'm not like more on board with that, but the fact that it's between spaces, which the Tree of Names kind of existed as like a conduit between realms. Um, and we, and the fact that it's like so closely tied with death made me think of the matron.
Mhm.
I don't really know where I'm going with this, but like I'm just trying to parse all of this. I don't really know what to make of it, like because the other Galdrashari trees, which I guess there's only really two that we know of, the Tree of Names and the one from Omadua. There wasn't really an implication that they were like windows into death or anything. So
Wasn't the implication of the Tree of Names that um it was created to prevent the matron, after the matron's ritual where she ascended, the Tree of Names was installed to prevent it from happening again. And isn't it the way the story goes, the Tree of Names, it scribes and like scribbles the names of the deities and entities to keep out? Or like, what was the name part of Tree of Names?
well, good thing we're having that Calamity rewatch. We'll be fresh up on all these details, but I don't specifically remember. I do remember that it was integral in, because Avalier was like writing a spell across the face of Exandria to protect it. And I know the Tree
Mm.
of Names was like integral in that. But as far as like the details of like, was it ascribing specific names to keep out? I don't know. But they
It
were all those things were connected though. You're
it
right.
was, but it was formed after the matron's ritual,
Right.
like as a response to prevent that from happening again.
Right.
So, so there's a connection with death right there.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. It's interesting, Yvonne Trevere having that similar connection, though we know it came about differently. But yeah, I don't know. Very very curious for sure.
Yeah. I don't I mean, yeah, I don't really know what to make of it aside just, completely baseless assumptions, but okay. So, I mean, we don't know how this works. We don't know how it works, but of do you think members of Bell's Hells will try to find out how they're going to die? Like it might not be as simple as like, do you want to know or do you not want to know? Like maybe that information isn't like simply you can come and ask for it. Like maybe it won't
Hmm.
even offer that to any of them, but that was such an interesting thing to throw in. Like
Well,
especially
like,
above the table in like a D&D context.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many like lore questions around it of like I could see someone like Chetney jokingly asking, for lack of a better phrase, and then like Matt giving like a very generic, kind of like when they scryed on Dorian, like you see Dorian in a cave.
Mm-hmm.
I could see, or on Matt's character, I can't, Dariax.
Yeah.
Um, I can see something similar, like you see yourself surrounded by loved ones, what have you. Now it puts the DM in a weird situation of like, you know, does this mean you don't die in the campaign now? Well, maybe you do, and it's like kind of how like these prophecies or whatever they go, like you were surrounded by loved ones. So I
Yeah.
could see something like that. I could also, I think it's a little bit more interesting for a character like Laudna, because Laudna doesn't age, right?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Like, by what metric would Laudna actually, by what method would Laudna actually die? Can it only be through force? I mean, for a character like her, I'd be more interested than I would anyone else, honestly.
Hmm. Yeah. And she was the one to even like I think bring that point up again to Jirana because I think she said as much like, "What if you already died?" Um,
Right.
so I mean that's too juicy of a thing for Matt to have like thrown in there to not be explored a little bit by someone. So I'm interested to see what happens there. But I just we know that Ashton's gonna deal with the tree. Like that much is certain. Seems like F.C.G might now as well because of the little combo they had. um, I think I mentioned this either in the recap or shortly after. I feel like all of them kind of have some serious issues with grief, except maybe Chetney, because I'm not that we've learned about with him, but like Laudna, we could be here all day talking about her grief. Imogen has a lot, like with her mom and just everything. F.C.G. Ashton clearly. Orem is one I would really like to see like peel
Mhm.
peel it back and dive into it because I almost think that Orem has more than anybody. Like, and he's not addressing it. Which is a whole nother combo that I don't really want to derail us, but I feel like, and we've talked about kind of being worried about the dad of the group for a while, but like throwing himself into harm's way, which he always did, to be fair, but like I don't know. I'm worried about our little halfling friend, and I don't see him like willingly going up to the trees, but I hope that happens. Like I hope they force him, or he does decide to do it ultimately, or something. But
You know what would be a really crazy plot hook is they go to the tree and one of them sees their death, and the details imply that it's like in the next day or something. And then there's like this crazy, like, how do I, can you change what the tree says? Like, kind of
mm,
leading up to like a Avengers in game, like Doctor Strange, like this moment, but like, is there a decision that can be made that prevents your death? I don't know. It would just be kind of like an interesting story, a story plot, I guess. Story
yeah,
plot, that's redundant, but a plot for what can happen. But
yeah, that's a good point. We're gonna get into a lot of like fate and determinism stuff here, but
yeah, I
like,
think that stuff's kind of fun,
yeah,
you
no, it
know?
is. But like, even if it wasn't the next day, like, what if Matt gives them a vision, and then like it would be so interesting to see them deal with it. Like the craziest thing that jumped into my head when you said that was like, what if Imogen saw Fern kill her because of that convo that Orem and Fern had, and there's
I was
like, wait,
gonna
what?
say I was gonna say Liliana or something and be like, oh, that'd be so now she has to choose between saving the world and dying. But that's even more interesting for sure. Yeah, if Fern, yeah. Oh, that'd be so wild
That'd be
for sure.
crazy.
If she saw Fern killing her, and then it just would be an interesting data point for
Yeah.
sure. But they also haven't really like hammed that animosity up at all,
No.
in the sense like we haven't really visited that in maybe, geez, I don't know, probably 30 episodes. It's been a
Yeah, I
long
mean that
time.
seems to be water under the bridge. I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
who knows what could happen in like a grand like a catch 22 moment of Imogen having pick between like her mom and her friends. Like who knows what could
yeah.
happen, but it does seem like Imogen has expressed that she doesn't want anything to do with this. She's team the gods. So yeah, that
What if
that
she
really
saw
hasn't been
Laudna
something.
Laudna killing her?
Whoa,
I mean,
that'd be
that would
crazy.
be Like what? So yeah, there's a lot Matt can do with this. So I hope it's weird saying I hope the master does it, but I just it'd be cool just to see kind of where he flexes the creative juices, where it goes.
Yeah, and then just like that's all that speculation is basically just from the see your own death thing, which was like kind of an aside. So like I'm curious just like what are they going to learn from this tree? Like how is this tree specifically going to help Ashton
Mm.
get clarification? I mean, I would assume it's got to be sort of related to the primordials and the titans. But
Well, and they went here to get a power of some kind. Like that was the original plan was
yeah.
let's harness the primordials because we're going to need them to fight against Predathos.
Yeah.
So
So
presumably they'll receive something.
when they don't have the harness cuz that's still being repaired, right?
Right.
So originally we were thinking like
Oh,
maybe
right.
Ashton would put on the harness and suck
Yeah.
up some energy here, but they don't have that. So that I
Right.
wonder what's not that was necessary, but maybe now it'll be more of a
Yeah.
interesting.
Right.
And I'm just we already talked about it, so we don't need to dive into it again. But I'm just so curious, like what this tree is and like what is going on with these realms. I did think that it was really interesting the connection between like kind of how they got here via Keyleth, because she sent them to talk to Jirana, who was like this therapist essentially. So
Yeah.
I liked that, like I liked the through line of Keyleth searching the world for answers against the gods, ending up here finding Jirana and like learning about Yvonne Trevere, who was also this druid who was like so suffused and surrounded by grief and sorrow, and the response to that was to take it on for everybody else and become like this beacon. And now Keyleth has kind of found some solace similarly in like becoming this bastion, this beacon for the world, really, as being like the leader of the Ashari and stuff. But
Right.
also literally at some point, hopefully far down the road, will too become a tree. I don't know why I did
Yeah.
quotes. I mean, she literally will be, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought that was cool that like there was a parallel between like this nameless Von Trevere and Keyleth, and now our party, who not to the same level because they're not arc druids, but
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. I kind of lost my landing point, but I mean, you guys
Yeah,
get it. You guys get it.
there's some nice symbolism there for sure. Yeah. What else from this app?
Um,
From this epi app? Just looking at my notes.
yeah, me too. I already said this, but massive Studio Ghibli vibes from just this world. I mean, they're all kind of like whimsical and fun for now. I'm sure they're about to get darker, but just with the big toad and I actually this isn't Studio Ghibli, but I tweeted at Matt to see if he would clarify here. I didn't get an answer, but Jirana and having like a huge toad really reminded me of Jiraiya, for those of you that are familiar with Naruto, which is like this similarly, like their names are very similar, Jirana, Jiraiya, and they both have a lot to do with enormous toads. So I was curious if that was just a coincidence or perhaps an inspiration, because I know like half the cast has worked on Naruto, including Matt. Um, don't really have anything else to say, but just thought I'd bring that up. Wonder if anybody else thought that as well. But yeah, really fun. Just really excited to see what happens in this place, and
Yeah.
'cause I think we've got a perfect storm of like really cool module, for lack of a better word, like a really cool setting,
Yes.
but also like some really interesting like RP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Matt's in explaining there's 40 something islands. I think Matt has basically put the canvas out and has said is basically implying like this is something that I either himself or people with Critical Role can add onto and paint onto for presumably the years to come. I mean, that's kind of the impression I got was there's so much to discover here, so much to do here, and for all we know, every island has its own ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the possibilities are endless too, because I mean, she said there were 43, but with such a crazy like concoction of space, like who's to say that like new islands don't sprout up that,
Right.
So yeah, I think there's a lot that could be done here, and it's definitely super cool. It definitely got my I haven't DM'd him forever, but it definitely got my DM brain like rolling when he was describing this place. I was just thinking this is like such a cool setting.
Yeah, dude. You gotta put together the group,
Oof. It's tough, man. It's
the power
tough.
team.
It's tough.
Always
Oh,
gotta find people to play.
I was looking through my notes. I just found this one random note that I put. Um Laudna, if she, has some dealings with this tree, we know she's got this whole Delilah thing going on, which that'll just be interesting in and of itself. But beyond that, we know that she kind of got rid of Delilah, sort of, not fully, obviously, but there was a lot of talk of like who would be her new patron, the Sun Tree, maybe. Yvonne Trevere feels like it fits her way more of like this tree of atrophy that's like dead and like between worlds. So I thought it'd be really cool if like Yvonne Trevere potentially became her new patron. Since her form of dread is already the creepy tree and everything, which again, Sun Tree obviously is probably where that originated from. But I think
Yeah.
this would be a cool like and makes sense type of like shift if it came to that.
I love that idea. Yeah. It fits her vibe much better for sure
Yeah.
than Suntree does. So I'll ship that. I like
Yeah.
that. So
Which I wonder if the Sun Tree is a Galdastari. It does.
yeah.
We've
It,
never. Go ahead.
I was just saying it feels like Matt had like created a detail that now there's a very easy connecting line to other trees.
Yeah.
In the sense of, we talked about even Calamity, like with Brittany Lee Mulligan, like describing the summoning of the Tree of Names. A very easy, retcon's even too strong of a word, in my opinion. A very easy clarification from Matt that was the Galdrashari summoning and becoming the Tree of Names. But yeah, I don't think it's too far fetched to say this Sun Tree could even have been a former Galdrashari.
Well, what we know of it, not that this is like a whole convo we need to get into, but from the established lore that we've been told, which is of course fallible, but the Dawn Father like planted the Sun Tree as like a reminder. I'm butchering it, but like after the calamity, it was like a symbol of his like protection and stuff. So
Mm.
both things could be true. Like, that could be like the folklore tale of it, but it was also
Yeah.
like a Gaudrashari that like decided to do that. But all that to say before people yell at me in the comments that it's not a Gaudrashari because the Dawn Father planted it. I know, but I do think it's still possible that it could be. It doesn't have to be though. And for my money right now, I would say it's not. But I definitely think it's cool that we have a lot of important trees. Let's call it.
Don't we think the Dawn Father could have lied?
Yeah, that's
I mean,
yeah.
after you have
True.
the Galdrasari that are, deeply linked to the primordials.
He
and
just
then
took the credit for it.
I mean, a god who just like, they're not so super high on primordials. Yeah, I put that.
I did that.
I made that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but all right. Well, if there's not anything else, I guess we got the upcoming episode here in a couple of days, which should be exciting. And you guys don't forget, Discord link is in the episode description. We'll have a watch party on Thursday night. It's always a really fun environment. Whether you're a newer watcher, you've been watching for a long time, literally everyone's welcome for whatever background or experience with the show. Come hang out with us. You're welcome. So
yeah, absolutely. And Calamity Rewatch will be starting here in a little over a week, week and a half on the 24th of this month. But again, join the Discord and keep an eye on the Calamity Rewatch channel for more information and potential updates there.
Yeah. Well, see you later.
Bye, y'all.